Take a peek at this thing. I want to play video games with it, not eat cereal. I get it, accessibility is very important, but you know what else is? Using action buttons at the same time as moving, which you can't do here. You try playing Doom with one hand. You bloody try. Strafing and weapon switching is over here, shooting is over here, while moving is over here.
For this challenge, I'm going to be attempting to beat Doom with only one hand. Specifically, I'm going to be using my mouse with no keyboard inputs whatsoever, besides pausing and stuff like that. I could use my keyboard for this challenge, obviously, but I like having that smooth analog aiming when playing Doom, so we're going with the mouse instead. The rules are no quick saves in the middle of levels. The only saves we'll be using are the autosaves at the beginning of each level, so basically a casual playthrough of Doom, but no saves coming. Now I know what you're thinking, how are you going to fit an entire FPS game's controls onto a single mouse? Well, a big reason why I love Doom is due to how simple and accessible it is. And not even in just the way it's open source and runs on everything, it's just that Doom is dead simple. You can't even look up or down. Moving, shooting, swapping, using, and mapping. That's Doom. That's the entirety of this game's verbs. Like, think about it. Doom has no secondary fire button. This is something that a lot of classic shooters did even before reloading was a commonplace mechanic. But not in Doom, there's a single fire button for every weapon. Typically when playing Doom with a standard WASD mouse config, most of the action is happening on the keyboard. You only use one of the 7 buttons on a standard gaming mouse for one purpose, firing the gun. And maybe use scroll wheel for swapping weapons if you're into that. So that leaves us with 6 available buttons. But even trying to map the 4 standard movement keys already gives us an obvious problem. That's 5 inputs already taken up, which is way too many. But it's not like we can simplify WASD, right? Well, you'd be surprised. If you've ever played Doom with the default mouse settings that come out of the box on the original release, you may notice that moving your mouse up and down instead of looking up and down actually moves your character forwards and backwards. This is because Doom didn't actually have vertical aiming. The game does that for you. Combined with the mouse looking left and right, we already have tank controls fresh out of the box. But of course, we don't want to swipe our way through Doom. So let's bind forward to the right mouse button. We won't bind a backwards key. In Doom, you typically move backwards for quick adjustments or dodging, so we're just going to swipe to do those. So now we've knocked it down to 3 movement buttons. But that isn't good enough for me. We gotta simplify more. We need a true minimalist Doom control scheme. Thankfully, the original game actually comes with another feature that is useful in this regard. Doom has a bit of an ancient keybind that was present in many old shooters, that being a strafe key. That's right, a singular strafe key. This was typically meant for keyboard-only players using tank controls, who could simply hold down a button to turn their turns into strafes. Hell, in the original version of Wolfenstein 3D, this is the only way to strafe. In Doom, this works with the mouse, meaning by simply holding a button, we have full analog control of our character movement. I'm gonna be real, this challenge was partially an excuse to use this feature because I think it's neat. So now we've simplified our movement controls from 4 buttons down to 2. This leaves a lot of room for extra functions. We just bind a key to use, and we can now technically beat the whole game. But of course we want to have weapon switching as well. Now we could just use the scroll wheel, but to put it simply, I hate the scroll wheel. It's finicky and annoying, and I don't like using it for weapon swatch. So this may be a bit controversial, but I'm going to employ the use of a weapon wheel mod. Now this pauses the game while open, which I'm sure is going to piss some people off, but remember, this is just meant to be a casual playthrough. In multiplayer or a competitive speedrunning, of course this wouldn't be an option, but to be fair, neither is the use of GZ Doom in the first place. Something I want to find out, along with how easy it is to beat Doom with this control scheme, is how fun it is to play Doom with this control scheme. I mean, there definitely may be people out there interested in this game who only have use of one of their hands. And I partially wanted to show just how accessible Doom as a game really is for that type of player. I feel like someone in that situation might actually employ the use of a mod like this. So it stays. That's 4 buttons used in total for our starting configuration of this playthrough. I also just straight up forgot to bind a map key, but that obviously would have been pretty easy to fix. And I've memorized the early levels of Doom so hard that I didn't even notice it until episode 3. Which is why, going into episode 1, I had a pretty good time. With how familiar these levels were, it was a pretty comfortable environment to practice the new control scheme in. But at the same time, I found myself getting very easily frustrated when I screwed up. Since I've played these levels so many times, I've almost become a bit of a perfectionist when playing them. So every little mistake I made stood out to me. Oh, damn it. When I'm panicking, I just can't dodge. Even though most of the time I was above 100 health and 100 armor, every tiny hit stung just a little more than usual. I'd say for most encounters I took like 1 or 2 more hits than I would have otherwise, which is pretty good in retrospect for playing on an entirely new control scheme. That's not bad at all, but I was still feeling the growing pains. The first thing I noticed was how easy it was to get my wires crossed. For instance, typically when I was encountered with something like an imp throwing a fireball, I just wouldn't be prepared. The button to dodge it was right there and I would just stumble around and get hit. Or worse, I would just continually back up until it finally hit me. The reason for this is I kept getting my side buttons mixed up. I would press the use key when I meant to strafe and vice versa. Eventually I got so annoyed with this, I turned both commands into a macro. Kind of like how in Doom Eternal the punch and use buttons are the same, I made the strafe and use key the same. In retrospect, this was rather impatient of me. I'm sure after a while I would have gotten used to where both the buttons were, but in the moment I was so annoyed with getting stuff mixed up that I resorted to a solution that ended up limiting me more, because this meant if I tried to strafe in a doorway, it would shut the door, so that made door fighting less of an option. Although it did end up helping me on one occasion. Alright, easier level now, just no biggie. I never knew there was a secret here. Oh my god, me using the straight one front thing revealed that I'm not even kidding. But I ended up getting used to these both being the same button pretty quick, so that's what I went with for the playthrough. But I want to stress here that the limitations are my fault. At this point I am using 4 of the 7 available buttons on the mouse. If you actually did have one arm and wanted to play Doom, you probably wouldn't have to use so little buttons. You would have a lot more time to get better at using one arm for all this stuff. But personally, in my brain, it was just really hard to adapt to everything being in one place. The keyboard and mouse setup just provides a nice separation of functionality. But at the same time, I feel like I resorted to drastic options a bit too soon, and it had some effects on the rest of the playthrough. Also, this is when I realized maybe having the keyboard totally unplugged wasn't a great idea, because I still needed it to pause the game and rebind controls, which I was doing a lot during these early segments, and it left the giant gash on my desk visible. Yeah, this desk is old. My setup is held together with duct tape, in some cases literally. Yeah, I need to get some new stuff. Support me on Patreon to make that happen. I did eventually just leave the keyboard plugged in because I kept having to fetch it again whenever I wanted to pause the game. I'm sure there's a way to rebind the pause key, but I don't know how. And yes, you may have noticed it at this point, but there were times when my other hand went to an unfortunate place. I swear, for half these clips, it's just hard to see and I had it on my leg. But I'm willing to admit there was once or twice where it just kinda rested there. I mean, sue me, it's warm. You know what? Fuck you, I'm not ashamed of my anatomy. If God didn't want us to use it, he would have given us hand warmers on our legs or something. But I actually didn't leave it there for long because whenever things got tense, I'd tense up and accidentally squeeze. It hurt. But to make the obvious joke you've already made in your head, yes, this means that this is the ideal way to play H-Doom, hee hee ha. Speaking of gripping stuff, something that I found was really fun to do with this control style was punching with the Berserk. Due to the way the mouse movement worked, it actually felt like I was punching in a weird way. Yeah. As well as chainsawing. Instead of tapping the movement keys to slowly pull back and avoid your enemy's melee attacks, I could slowly and smoothly pull back. It's the same kind of tactile feedback as Luigi's Mansion, if that makes any sense. It just rules. Where are you going? Where are you going? Oh, okay. The mouse being a totally analog form of movement meant that peeking around corners was maybe the easiest it's ever been with Doom's slippery movement, giving line of sight fights with hit scanners a bit more depth. Wide open areas, on the other hand, were where this control scheme really started to show its limitations. The Baron of Hell fight was pretty brutal without circle strafing, and you'll see this as a theme for this playthrough. Especially considering all the invisible pinkies just running around the arena, it's really a boss fight that tests your mobility. At first I tried to hide in a corner and kill all the pinkies with a chainsaw, but that didn't work out. Alright, not the best strategy. The only way to do it ended up being to fucking do it. Just run to one end of the arena, away from the chaos of the Invisipinkies and Barons, let them infight and take some shots, and when things got too close, rinse and repeat. Overall, while I was still getting used to the controls, episode 1 was a good time, as it always is when you're playing Doom. But it did end on a rough note. But that general feeling of positivity kept up when going into episode 2. Ironically, when I got to the levels I knew less, it became a bit less stressful, because I wasn't in that perfectionist mindset I talked about earlier. Plus, I was just getting a lot better. I was dodging a lot more consistently, I could strafe run more consistently. Oh, there we go. There was some good dodges. But near the halfway point of episode 2, I hit a wall. It felt like there was a serious difficulty spike somewhere halfway through the episode. Around the same place I felt that during my first playthrough of Doom, actually. This level right here, E2M4 Deimos Lab. Episode 2 is a bit more fun than I remember. Oh, this one. I took a few good deaths on this level. Quite a few were due to these crushers, more than I would like to admit, but it's worth bringing up that an unintended side effect of using the mouse for character movement as well as aiming is that there was a few times when I would just move forwards or backwards when turning, because when moving your hand to aim, it doesn't go perfectly straight. So I'd accidentally step into these crushers or fall off of ledges. And I was really missing the precision of key-based strafe running. There are two values for movement in Doom, and when they both reach top speed combined, they give you a little speed boost. But with analog movement, it is a lot easier to just not hit one of those two top speeds because there's a lot more variability. Strafe running requires going nearly perfectly diagonal, which is a lot easier with a couple of digital keys rather than a complete 360 analog range of movement. Due to this, I feel like I took a lot of damage that I wouldn't have in the past. One of the most fun parts of Doom is essentially firewalking across pools of lava, so this was a bit disappointing. Overall though, episode 2 was definitely the peak of my fun factor with this experiment. I felt like I was improving rapidly and the game was decently unpredictable. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? That bastard went in the door because I was over here. So he, like, his pathfinding screwed up and he went in the door and then he came out to scare me. But of course, with the Cyber Demon being another boss fight in a wide open arena, the same issue that I had with the Barons in episode 1 reared its ugly head, but with a vengeance. This boss fight is nearly synonymous with circle strafing, but obviously we can't do that. So I took a few deaths right away. You just gotta treat these boss fights like a big scary imp. Same basic dodging patterns, but the splash damage meant I had to be very aware of my surroundings. The pillars and lost souls meant it was somewhat unpredictable. I actually kinda ended up accidentally getting him stuck in this room and took the opportunity to cheese him, but he ended up escaping. At this point I was really beginning to consider if I had over-engineered my control scheme. It ended up being almost hyper-minimalist to the point where it was detrimental to my gameplay. To be honest, I kinda didn't put much thought into this when I started this challenge. I thought, oh, Doom is so simple, I bet I could beat it one-handed, and just started recording. But I also was sort of excited because I felt like I could make some kind of point about Doom's accessibility when I started this challenge. Like, the benefit of a game this simple is that it allows more people to play it. But I was starting to feel kind of stupid for thinking that way. Because what I ended up finding when I did a bit of research into this topic was that it was kind of a gross underestimation of someone in this situation where they would only have use of one of their arms. People can and have used much more complex controls than this in that situation. Like the weapon wheel mod. I justified that earlier by saying someone in this situation might use a mod like this, but at the same time, someone in that situation would also have a keyboard nearby and could very easily just bind all their weapons to the right side of the keyboard for easy access. I even found an entire brand of controllers made for one-handed players, full PlayStation controllers. So it's not like a game needs to be this simple to accommodate one-handed players. Hell, there's even a video out there of someone beating E4M1 with one arm. A level from the extra difficult bonus episode for Ultimate Doom that I didn't even attempt for this playthrough because I've never actually beaten it two-handed. This guy was actually a well-known mapper in the community called Espy, but he had lost his arm due to cancer. But damn, he did not let that stop him from beating a notoriously hard level with his one functioning arm just to show off a little, making the best of a really shitty situation. Unfortunately, he later passed away due to the same condition, but he made some really awesome stuff during his time in the Doom community. I really recommend checking it out. He's got a Doom Wiki article with links to all his stuff. Hell, considering the popularity of flight sticks for FPS gaming back when Doom was popular, there probably were people who beat this game one-handed without even thinking about it. So yeah, this playthrough isn't as groundbreaking as I naively hoped it would be. There's much more complex, accessible controllers than a standard gaming mouse out there. In fact, a very basic upgrade to this setup you could actually use if you were in the situation is some foot pedals to use for strafing, instead of using the strafe button, which limits your mobility pretty heavily. So I went into this last episode with a renewed mindset that this was just a casual challenge for myself more than anything. And that fits, because episode 3 is definitely a fucking challenge. Good God, I forgot how much I hated the last episode of Doom. There's so many levels with strange, almost esoteric design that makes it easy to get lost, annoying swarms of samey enemies with no rhyme or reason to them that are just a chore to get through. It's not even that hard, it's just annoying. Is there a key back here? No, there is not. There's nothing back here. Oh, that was the thumb. Oh, it was the thumb. Of course, you always go with the pinky finger. There was one point where I got angry at this tiny little trap that didn't get me, but at the same time, I was somewhat offended that the designers thought it would. Fuck you. That's such a cheap move. I don't By the point I got to the Hell City level, I was yelling at my screen frequently. Ew, tree! Made worse by the fact I forgot where the notoriously hard to find exit for this level was. Tear me apart, Lisa. Here. Fuck off. What are you talking about? Oh, is that the secret exit? That's gotta be the secret exit, right? No, it's not the secret exit. That's the real thing. Still, by the end, I did kind of feel like I was mastering this control scheme. While chainsawing, I figured out that if I curved my mouse to the right while moving down, it would just recenter itself. So I didn't have the problem of repeatedly readjusting my hand position and risking a bite from pinkies or cacos. Look at how my hand is moving around at this point. I was really getting a feel for this. It's just too bad that while it was happening, I was being subjected to the worst that the original Doom has to offer. But man, it was satisfying to finally take out the big bad, the Spider Mastermind. How hard was this boss fight? First try, idiot. Get out of here! Yeah! Wait, with one hand. There you go. That is Doom! Beaten with only the mouse, with only one hand. Let's go! Yeah! In total, I died 29 times. Considering last time I played through Doom I only took around 3 or 4 deaths, that's a notable increase. But it's worth noting, it had been a while since I last played through it. For casual playthroughs, I think this works. It's definitely limiting and not competitively viable, and you may struggle with custom maps, but it's important to mention that this is the bare minimum. This is the most simple I could make Doom's controls and still have it be playable. I mean, hell, this is still better than the controls on some of the official console ports of Doom. If you actually were disabled in one arm and did want to play Doom on a higher level, there's a lot more you could do than just this. This right here really ended up being an exercise in minimalism. And when it comes to accessibility, really goes to show how far you can shave down this game's controls and still have a decent experience overall. The only reason I went so far into simplifying these controls for this playthrough is because I didn't have time to rewire my brain into playing this game with a more complex one-handed control scheme. But if you were in a situation where you were disabled and really wanted to play full-fledged Doom, it takes a little while to wire your brain properly to play it well, but it can be done. Overall, I had a good time, because Doom is a good time, no matter how you play it. See you next time.